And hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Newswatch Oklahoma. And here's what I have to tell you is welcome to Andy Moore and Augusta McDonnell. So in our Monday night program, Augusta, somewhere during the middle of the program, we got a person wrote in on our StreamYard and said, "Get Augusta back. Why are you old guys? Where's Augusta?" And I was like, Augusta's here on Wednesday night. But it didn't make any difference. So she's back. So if you were watching Wednesday night, Augusta's back. And my friend Andy Moore. And our first topic tonight is why people don't go to Aaron Rodgers' doctor. Now, it's a Wednesday night program. We'll do that another time. So Aaron's probably joining us tonight from 10-day enforced quarantine for people that aren't vaccinated in the NFL. And as a Packer shareholder, I'm kind of annoyed tonight, but that's how it goes. We have bigger fish to fry, and Andy Moore, who wears more hats than anybody that I know, is our guest.
Keep seeing your name pop up on things, Andy. I'm just like, oh, him again. There he is.
I'm just trying to inspire other people to help us save our democracy.
Which is fabulous, yes.
Sometimes people don't take it that way, right, Mr. Moore? I mean, sometimes it becomes, what is Andy up to now? But I got to tell you, this is a gentleman who has been working tirelessly in fields. If we had time, we would talk about what's happened to people because of COVID and quarantine. And we'll do that another time, okay, Andy? Who knows that field like a few people. But tonight, Augusta, he's here on another topic.
He is.
Redistricting.
This week, yes, we have gotten the opportunity to see the state's congressional and legislative redistricting maps. And Andy, you've been talking about this in all sorts of publications this week. What surprised you when you saw them for the first time?
I guess, what was most surprising was that we weren't that surprised based on some of the maps that were submitted by, we'll say members of the public, but we know many of them are lobbyists, consultants, people who do business with current congressional representatives, and people who have worked for the Oklahoma Republican Party in some cases. They submitted maps, and the one that was adopted looks eerily similar to those maps in some really important ways.
What sort of similarities are you seeing to those interests?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at Oklahoma County, which has certainly been the piece that has gotten the most coverage, and rightly so, under the proposed maps, Oklahoma County will be divided between 3 congressional districts, unlike that map has been drawn in about 30 years. The last time that we saw Oklahoma County divided in basically the same way, it was done by Democrats, and back then was lauded by Republicans as being a terrible gerrymander. And apparently we've come full circle where Republicans now feel like that map is the right way to draw it. And I'm here to tell you that both parties are wrong. This is clearly a gerrymander. It was back then, it is today.
I think it's interesting, the conversations that I've heard this week where we're trying to identify if pockets of people are going to be fairly represented in Oklahoma by a member of Congress or a representative in the legislature. The question of, do they share the same interests and the same issues as other people in Oklahoma in a different area, different ethnicities? I guess I'm sort of curious, what informs how we break people into groups and decide how to represent them well in this process? Because it can't just be location. There's many layers to our community.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The lines have to be drawn somewhere. Now, how and why they're drawn there matters a great deal. And so, best practices describe redistricting involving compactness, the overall shape and how compact a district can be. Now, in Oklahoma, we're going to have some districts that are not compact, right? Because we have a lot of counties that are sparsely populated. In fact, nearly half of the population fits into just 4 counties or lives in just 4 counties. So we know that we're going to have some that are very compact and some that are more spread out. We also want to protect communities of interest. Now, this could be cities, towns, counties, communities, neighborhoods, however people choose to kind of group themselves, where we choose to live by people who tend to be like us. and we want to try to avoid breaking those up whenever possible. We also want to be particularly careful when it comes to racial or ethnic groups who often live in, and again, often live in similar areas. We want to make sure that we are keeping them together and not cracking them or breaking them apart or cutting them off from their community for the sake of diminishing their voice. And I think that's one of the main concerns that we see with the maps that were proposed this week.
And in what areas and to which people are you concerned that that has happened?
Yeah, so if you look at, again, at the map of Oklahoma County in particular, where it's divided between the 3rd, 4th, and 5th congressional districts, we see what's been the case for the last couple of decades, that Tinker Air Force Base and the area surrounding that is put into the 4th district. And while Oklahoma County by itself could be a congressional district entirely by itself, there was a lot of feedback that people like having Tinker and Fort Sill down in Lawton in the same congressional district. So fine, they kept it that way. They added a little bit of Midwest City to it, but I think that there's a decent argument for that to happen. However, they carved out a large portion of almost downtown Oklahoma City, and especially South Oklahoma City. From south of downtown, most of the airport, although not all of Will Rogers is in the 3rd district, but they moved a big chunk of that into the 3rd district. And when you look down in the data, as I did today, half of the Hispanic population of Oklahoma County lives in that area. So it's only about 80 square miles, which is about 1/10 of all of Oklahoma County. We're about 800 square miles in size. In that 1/10 of the county lives 56% of the Hispanic population. And now those folks have been drawn into an entirely different congressional district, a congressional district that stretches from now Oklahoma City all the way out to Texas, to New Mexico, up north. So it includes Woodward, it includes Guyman, and those areas. And those, I think all Oklahomans would agree, those are very different areas with very different concerns in everyday life. And so to lump them in the same district is a problem, both for people in Oklahoma County and for those out in the Panhandle, but particularly for my friends and neighbors that live literally half a mile from my house that now live in another congressional district.
I was in a media briefing on Tuesday where Speaker McCall responded to a question about, what happened in the southern part of the city, being lumped into that 3rd congressional district, and, expecting a largely Latino Hispanic community to be represented by the same person who's trying to represent everybody who lives out in the Panhandle. And his comment was that Guyman has the predominant language in the schools in Guyman is Spanish. And it was kind of like a full stop response to that question. I mean, there's many different aspects to different ethnic groups. There's class, there's rural, there's urban divides. What do you think of that response coming from a lawmaker who worked on the process of completing these maps?
Yeah, no, that's true, right? They speak the same language, but people in Argentina and Chile also speak the same language. That doesn't mean that people have that language alone is what should lump them in the same congressional district or the same continent in that case. The fact is, our population here in Oklahoma County lives here in Oklahoma County. They live and work. They go to school. They participate in the economy. They create jobs here in Oklahoma County, not necessarily in Guyman or out in Texas County, right? And while some people may have something in common, that doesn't necessarily mean they should be lumped in the same congressional district. And the fact is, Republicans have drawn the map for the last 20 years without those people included, and those two groups in separate districts. And the only reason they're doing it now is because they did it so they can disperse the vote. That part of town, I believe, from what I've read, voted primarily Democratic in the last presidential election, and perhaps in other elections before that. And this seems like a clear effort by Republicans who hold the majority in both chambers, who drive the redistricting commission, and who hold all 5 congressional seats, to ensure that those seats remain strongly Republican. not even competitive, right? Like they're so scared of a competitive race that they would rather insure and go way the other way. And I'm afraid that in doing so, they're committing a sin of really jeopardizing and disenfranchising 86,011 Hispanic voters or Hispanic residents in South Oklahoma County.
Do you think that this ensures that Congresswoman Bice wins re-election?
Oh, almost certainly. Based on partisanship scores that I've looked at since they released the map, this moves the 5th district from being the most competitive to the second least, right? The 4th competitive. It is strongly Republican district. And they did that by adding a number of additional counties that were not included in the 5th district, right? There's a lot of talk of, well, they wanted to protect and keep Pottawatomie County and Seminole County in the district. Those two counties together only comprise, roughly 90 or 100,000 people, 1/7 of the total population of what a district needs. But they added in Lincoln County, they added in parts of Logan County and Canadian County, so that the 5th district that could be drawn with just one county right here in the middle of the state now includes part of or whole 6 other counties. And that just seems like unnecessary for one. And again, an overtly political and partisan effort.
I want to also tell folks, Andy will be hot seat guest a week from Saturday, and sort of wrap this up because there's a lot. I know that you're going to be talking a lot in the media and doing things when they go into special session. It's the 15th that they're going into special.
Yeah.
What are you going to be doing between now and then? What do you hope to get done during the session, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, we want all Oklahomans to know that the maps have not been adopted yet, despite comments from leadership that make it sound like they are not interested in the public comment. You still have a voice. Until the governor signs these bills, you still have a voice. And now I want all Oklahomans to know, now's the time. Contact your state legislators, contact the leadership in both chambers, and let them know that this kind of map is not okay. This is not what Oklahomans want. This is the only people who are satisfied by this map, honestly, are the politicians who benefit from it. The rest of Oklahoma, the other 4 million of us, are deeply dissatisfied. And I want other Oklahomans to know that you still have a voice and that your voice matters. And now is the time for you to speak up and use it.
Any place for people who are interested in this, want to know more, where should they go? Any resources you could log into to see?
Sure, yeah. So you can certainly come to our website. It's peoplenotpoliticians.org. And we've got resources on there. And we're updating it all the time. In fact, I've got an update pending later tonight or tomorrow that will make it even easier for people to contact their state legislators. If you want to know more from the state legislature, take it with a grain of salt, but you can go to okhouse.gov and oksenate.gov and see what they've put out. But certainly come to peoplenotpoliticians.org and we'll set you straight. Okay.
A lot between now and the 15th. And I saw today, I believe the speaker was saying that probably no mask mandates. This is probably going to be it right now in the special session. And that's going to be what this is about. So Andy Moore, who is one of the really good guys in Oklahoma, and appreciate you coming on. We'll see you a week from Saturday, and we'll watch what happens during the session.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Augusta.
Thanks, Andy. Have a great evening.
So, and Augusta, you had a story. Was it yesterday with Andy? Was that
yes.
your story?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, talked to him yesterday about the maps. Just kind of, I think there's an interesting dynamic happening right now in that Governor Kevin Stitt is in Mexico, fostering relationships with government officials there, and then we're also looking at the situation that's going on, the southern situation with the congressional map on the southern side of the city, where there's concerns that the Latino vote is potentially being diminished by the redistricting. And so I think I think it's an interesting question. How much does this government want to encourage Hispanic and Latino people to, engage and have their voices heard? I think that question will need to continue to be asked.
you're gonna stay on that beat for the next week and a half as this moves towards special session?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. If not myself, other reporters at News 9, certainly.
All right. Last week we talked with the group, I believe Augusta was Parent Voices Oklahoma. They were very upset with what had been happening on the National School Board Association. 20 state organizations had dropped out of the national group. Oklahoma's has not just yet, but they're really incensed about this. And when we saw in Virginia yesterday, education issues are going to be what this 2022 midterms are about, and probably in Oklahoma. And you had an interesting conversation. You want to introduce our next guest to talk about this topic?
Absolutely. We've got Reverend Clark Fraley, who is the executive director of Pastors for Oklahoma Kids, a group that generally works to advocate for strong public education in the state. Reverend, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Pastor.
So you reached out after watching the show last week, wanting to inform this conversation with some of your, your perspective on privatizing education. Talk to us a little bit about, your reaction to the conversation we had last week.
Sure. I think as it was being presented, just kind of the idea kept coming back to my mind that it seems like the national conversation has hijacked very real local needs. And that's very concerning, I think, anytime that you are focused on an issue like this that affects so many. We can talk about political issues all day long and they affect different subgroups. But when you talk about public education, you're talking about 700,000 children in the state of Oklahoma. And then if you add their families to that, you've got a large group of people in a state under 4 million people. So a lot of affected folks when we start having those conversations. And I think the concern that I have seen expressed through our network is that this is becoming a partisan or political issue when it's really not that. It really should never devolve into that. And kids certainly should not be used as some sort of stepping stone for politics. And so, we have some real issues going on locally. And so when this national letter, and then if you look into it, I think part of my concern was also it's just not really quite the issue that it's being made out to be. And so I think that was a very concerning thing. Then when you hear, parents are upset about this in Oklahoma, and I'm like, well, I'm a parent and I know lots of parents, and I don't know anyone that's focused on some national school board letter circulating in the media. Like, I think sometimes, the social media and even traditional media can get a story and it's really exciting and there's a lot of smoke, but there's not any fire. There's nothing going on there locally, at least. And so I think that was a big concern. To me, our foundation is that every child is a creation of God. Every child is unique, and no matter their skin color, no matter their family's wealth or zip code, they are guaranteed a free public education in the state of Oklahoma by our Constitution. And so I think that's a shared value we have, obviously, since our foundation, but I think it's something that most Oklahomans I meet can voice very clearly and undeniably say, that's something we want. So parents are part of that conversation, obviously, and their voices are vital into that conversation. That's where education starts, in the home at an early age. But we have to get back to the shared values, I think, and instead of focusing on what national groups want to rile us up or get us separated into different camps, start coming back to this idea of cooperating and working together so that kids get those educational opportunities.
So the midterm election, 2022, that the governor's race with Superintendent of Public Instruction Joy Hoffmeister and Kevin Stitt, I think that's the likely talked about possibility would bring a lot of education policy issues to the forefront. Education is a big topic right now nationally. It's a politicized topic, and I guess what policies do you think should be handled with care by lawmakers or people running for office in order to protect the well-being of kids and students in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, you raised a great point. It is become somehow kids and their education a touch point where we can maybe get people excited to maybe vote. But the problem with that is, as it would be with anyone that would vote on one issue, is what is going to be done about that. Schools have been under fire for a long time. Oklahoma from 2008 to 2018 had the steepest cuts to funding for education of any state, and not even close by a long shot. We were lower, we cut programs for kids, and that really started to affect kids negatively with overcrowding in classrooms, with textbooks that were falling apart and that were over a decade old. And our schools were very literally being starved out. The same legislators that defunded our public schools and caused our current teacher shortage and problems are now stoking some fantasies to somehow turn parents against their local schools. And to me, that is sad. It's a little depressing, and it's immoral. It's not something that should be done. We should keep things on the up and up, especially to me, it's a very sensitive issue because it affects kids. It affects the kids in our community. It affects school teachers I know. It affects principals and superintendents that we know that are in our communities that are supporting community efforts and certainly there every day with our children. And so I think, to me, the popular thing to say right now seems to be, don't indoctrinate our students or something like that. And I think we have to be really careful with listening to kind of the partisan politics on that, because there's a big difference between teaching about political systems and teaching history and culture and indoctrinating. And I think, I been very clearly know that difference as someone that teaches the Bible and teaches some pretty terrible things sometimes, like child sacrifice and polygamy and Cain killing his brother, and then going, okay, wait. Those are descriptive of history, but those are not prescriptive. Don't go do that. Don't go do those things. And so parents need to know that their children are not being misled when they are being taught that we are an imperfect country with an imperfect past full of imperfect people. To ignore that fact is to deny the very foundations of everything that Christianity is all about. We're anything but perfect, but we are trying to perfect our union. We're trying to move forward. We're trying to do these things, but apart, that's not a path forward. Apart, and us versus them and fighting each other. And, it's very difficult, I guess, to maybe get elected without a defined enemy. And so you have to create that. And I think it's unfortunate that it's happening in our schools and our communities with families and parents who definitely need a voice in their kids' education, but they don't need to be pitted against others that are valuing the same thing, which is an education. I think brighter days are ahead, but not with division. And so that would be my kind of perspective and thought there from what I'm hearing from different, big and large schools and small schools across our state.
In communicating with schools, are you hearing of any needs that parents could fill? There's teacher shortages, there's staffing shortages. I'm pretty sure most schools would be happy to take a bus driver right now if somebody wanted to go get their license or their cert. Sure. I guess just in communicating with schools, what sort of needs are you hearing where parents who might be concerned about what's going on in the school could step in and contribute?
Yeah, and I think, as a pastor, so our perspective has always been like, how can we do no harm? Like, how can we be a part of supporting the local school, and how can we encourage churches to do this? And so we regularly publish ideas for churches on how they can interact and help out with the school without kind of overstepping those bounds, because we also are strong supporters of a separation of church and state. And so we want to be helpers instead of like going into the school and kind of demanding, we want to use this space, we want to pass this flyer out or something like that. Instead of demanding, we want to find ways that we can help. And if, I think every school has different comfort levels with that. And I think honestly, being respectful of that is a big thing. Some schools want you to come in and, do simple things. We've done projects where we have rebuilt like flower garden beds before. I've seen some parts of the state asking for parents to come and help do things like that, like painting playgrounds and things that they're not able to afford or have the labor to do. Like you said, school bus drivers. I mean, that takes a little bit of a mental status to be there, because that's such a tough job. People don't really realize how tough that is, but it's very difficult to drive and to maintain that loudness in the background and everything. But substitute teachers for sure. Ways to kind of like what we've focused on in the past is figuring out ways to bless teachers and to, they have a rough job already. They're already doing something that I don't want to do. I covered a class when there was a funeral for one of the school secretaries in my kids' school, and I had the 4th grade, and I was there, I think, for 4 hours total. And by the end, the teacher came back and said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Not well. I need to go home.
Not okay.
I am not okay." And I'm glad you got to go do that. But she had like a quick trip, big drink, beverage or big gulp or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, you stopped by the gas station, huh? Save me. I needed help here." So that's not my calling. But to think about our teachers who already have all that stress, and then on top of it, are hearing some of the false things that are kind of being said in order that someone can score some political points. That's a large reason. One of the biggest reasons I would say that our organization really got fired up in 2016 when we started was to kind of defend our teachers who they're easy to take pot shots at, right? They're in the classroom all day. They're not out there on TV and making comments to newspapers. They're not in front of a microphone. They're not on social media all day. They're teaching the kids. And so it's easy to kind of step on them and trample them, I think. And we kind of wanted to say, hey, don't do that. We know these people. They're volunteers in our churches. These are people in our community. We know these people, and don't use them for your aims. And it kind of slowed down, honestly, after that. In 2017 and 18, we didn't notice it, but like you said, it's obviously going to be a big thing right now, and it's come back to the forefront. We just hope that it's not. We just hope that politicians will take a step back and maybe humanize this for a moment and not do things that'll negatively affect our schools and negatively affect our kids too.
Keep preaching, Pastor. By the way, I would tell you this is a personal moment. So my second job out of college, first job was in television. The second job was the press guy for the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. Okay, so I was around a lot of cops, a lot of guns, a lot of bad people. About 5 years later, I took a part-time job at our church's school, high school. Nothing is as scary as walking in front of 20 kids, like sophomores, Absolutely. And doing history. I'm telling you, there was nothing ever scared me at the Bureau of Narcotics. It was as scary to stand in front of that classroom. And I got to tell you, that's where that I began to appreciate all the folks that had been in my life earlier when I was in grade school, kindergarten, high school, all those things. So it's a tough job. I appreciate you saying that. I hope you'll come back often as we go into
this. Yes, please.
This next year, there's going to be a whole lot of education talk, and really appreciate your voice. And thanks for reaching out, by the way.
Sure.
I think it's instructive, Augusta, that Pastor Fraley reached out to you and said, hey, there's all sides to this, and that's what we want to do. This is the place where we can have these long-form discussions, and not so much tonight, not long. 15 minutes is not a lot, but really do appreciate you reaching out and what you have to say, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, definitely soon. Thank you.
Well, he was good.
He was good.
Yeah.
I just think, he brought up an interesting question of, disinformation with information coming from schools. And, I guess for parents, our COVID policies have been different for every single school. I can see why that organization started to kind of rise and clarify information and use that as one of their, points of leadership. I think it can be tricky to get good information in today's media environment.
Well, it's going to be an education election. And how's this for a segue? When we segue right into the Secretary of Education in Oklahoma. I don't know if you caught much of Pastor Fraley's visit there, Mr. Secretary. Ryan Walters, good to have you. It's a pretty snazzy jacket there, man.
Yeah, thanks. Really thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, appreciate y'all having me on tonight.
Absolutely.
We
Glad
were
to
just
have
talking
you.
about, sorry, Augusta. I was just saying, we were just talking about classroom, staying in front of classrooms. You do that all the time.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
scarier than your job, your political job?
Hey, I tell people all the time, I mean, cabinet meetings are pretty intense, but entering a room full of 25, high school students is pretty intimidating itself. So, yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. I always look at, teachers and what it takes to be a successful teacher. And I mean, these are folks that lead groups of young people through curriculum, but through life at a very difficult stage. So, teachers are leaders in their schools. As a matter of fact, some of the things I am very passionate about is empowering them to even be greater leaders in their schools by looking at things a little bit differently in the way that we set them up for success. But yeah, our teachers are absolutely leaders in the position they're in, and done well. I still stand by being a really effective teacher is one of the most difficult things to do, because you're not talking, the task is so complex when you talk about 20 to 30 young people, all at different stages, all with different talents and issues, and trying to get them to academic excellence is incredibly difficult.
Can I play a clip from a couple of weeks ago? I did this interview as an exclusive with Congressman Lucas, and we were talking about vaccinations. Also an education topic, as you know. I mean, as we look at this, we come out of the pandemic, I asked him to look into the crystal ball about what happened last night. This is a real short bite. Mr. Secretary, listen to this for me. Your thoughts about where we're headed today. Do we see any elections coming up where the election would present a new Frank Lucas, or somebody that would say, all right, this is where things are trending?
Most of the political pundits would tell you, Scott, that this gubernatorial race out in Virginia is a nip and tuck battle between where we go next. It's will be a statement about, so far, the Biden, Pelosi, Chuck Schumer handling of the national government, since the Democrats have total control.
As I looked into the crystal ball and told us what was going to happen. And I guess my question is this: the issues, it's been played all day long. Education was a big issue. Former Governor McAuliffe made a statement. He goes, I can't, if I can say this correctly, it was basically, I don't think it's parents have any business in telling schools how to teach their kids. He wore that one like an albatross. Pastor Fraley just got off saying, can we approach education issues over this next year in a non-political way? You heard what the congressman has to say. You know where national Republicans are going to go. It's going to be about education. We have a superintendent of public instruction that's going to challenge our sitting governor. You're running for her position right now. Break it down as to, can we keep this conversation about the facts, leave out the politics, in the midst of a very, very heated political season?
Yeah, last night was the least surprising thing I've seen in politics in a long time. We've seen it play out here in the state of Oklahoma. The parents want to be involved in their child's education. The more that you empower parents to be involved in their child's education, the better academic results you have. We see that amongst policies around the state. I can tell you that as a teacher, when I had parents that were engaged in what we were doing in class, when they wanted to talk to me about what we were doing in class, when they were very engaged in their child's learning, asking questions, being engaged, that student was set up much better for academic success and life success. And parents want to be involved. And so last night we saw a candidate go all in on that, which again, as Oklahomans, we passed some major education reform bills last session because we listened to parents and what they wanted, and we championed that in the legislature and got those things across the finish line. We have record investment in public education in the state of Oklahoma. And we have a candidate running for governor in Virginia that decides that he's going to champion this message that, again, we've seen incredibly successful. As a matter of fact, you can go as far back as you want. And parents' role in a child's education is crucial. It goes back over 100 years. We've got all kinds of studies around that. Then you want to go to the other side of the aisle, and they decide to go all in on, they're not. Mom and dad, this is, just sit this one out. We've got it. We don't need your help. We don't need your involvement. Don't ask any questions. Don't come to the school board meetings. Don't ask what you're being taught in your school. Don't ask what curriculum your child's being exposed to. And that played out exactly the way we're going to see it play out all over the country. And so what I would like to see is people actually mean it when they say they want parents involved. When they see I've been listening for years now folks complain about people not being at school board meetings. We got people at school board meetings now. We got people asking about what's being taught in our schools. We have people asking about how do we empower teachers for success. We have folks out there in the community saying, what can we do to improve our schools? When parents want to be engaged in their child's education, the answer every time is yes. And so if one group of people want to say no, leave this to other people, that is not going to be a winning political message. This is the least shocking thing I've seen in a long time. I can't believe we saw one candidate with such a great message, and then the other candidate decided to triple down the other way. It just, like I said, I'm not surprised by those results in the slightest.
Well, the independents went away in Virginia. I mean, they were there for the president against the former president, and they went back the other way.
Hey, look, I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative Republican. I'm running for statewide office. I'm very clear about that. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I think this is a conservative value, having parents involved in their child's education. But I have Democrats, I have liberals come up to me all the time and say, absolutely, we believe the same thing. We're concerned about what's being taught in our schools. We want to be more concerned. We want to be more involved in our child's education. This is not a partisan issue. If somebody wants to make a partisan issue of it, that's their prerogative. But it shouldn't be. And to be frank, I don't think education should be either. I think that we all should want what's best for our kids, and now we can say it and we can actually do it. Now, when we say we want parents involved in our kids' education, that means you got to listen to parents. That means you got to actually respond to what the parents are saying. And so the concerns that I heard in Virginia are the concerns that I hear more than anything else when I talk to parents. I talk to parents every single day. And the concerns I hear from parents are, what are their kids being taught in school? The concerns I hear from parents are my child being set up to be successful? The concerns I hear from parents is, why are we not being welcomed in some of these school board meetings? Why am I not being treated as part of my child's education success? And the other thing that I hear a lot from parents is, again, what are we doing to make sure our teachers are being supported? These are the type of questions that I get every day from parents. And these are parents that want to help. But those are concerns they have. And to me, there's nobody who is going to love a child more and know a child better than their mom and dad. Just plain and simple. We have to have parents involved, and to do that, we actually have to listen to what they have to say, and we have to continue to work to creating an education system that meets the needs of every single child, every single unique child. They need to be treated as an individual. The system needs to recognize them as an individual and give them pathways to success. And the only way that we can do that is when we listen to our parents and act upon what their concerns are.
What are some examples of issues or things where parents are finding themselves not being heard in Oklahoma schools? Yeah,
so I've got an example burning hot right now, and I'm not going to name the district or where it is, but it'll play itself out. Of parents that are very concerned about the curriculum, very, very explicit sexual material in a classroom. And they've gone to a superintendent who's told them that this won't be allowed at the board meeting to be discussed with the school board. I've got examples of parents that have addressed concerns about the type of racialization of some of the curriculum inside a classroom. And again, I'm telling you, it's cut every which way. I mean, some of the most disturbing type of curriculum I've seen is some of this that is very stereotypical towards Native Americans. And again, this can be addressed if we all are open to the conversation of, we want to open up what's going on in our schools. We want to show, again, I go back to, as a teacher, I wanted the parents to see I still do. I want parents to see every single thing I'm teaching in my class. Here it is. Here's what we teach. Here's why we teach it. Here's its alignment to the standards. Here's why I think it's important for your kid to know. That conversation has to happen. Again, the more that a parent is asking those questions, the more that a parent is involved, the more likely I feel that their kid's going to be successful. And so there's a couple of examples there. And again, I'm not going to give super specifics as these things are playing out. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's every week. We had the same thing through COVID. I've got a ton of examples of school districts with their quarantine policies that parents want to come to a school board meeting and ask questions about it. And we're told they couldn't. And we're not given very direct answers of what these policies were. And again, not to say that these decisions are easy. School board members have a really tough job on their hands, and it's a thankless job. But you know what? we're in these positions, whether it be a teacher, whether it be a school board member, whether it be a school leader, whether it be Secretary of Education, whether it be a legislator, we're in these positions when we're talking about education to do what's best for the kids. That's my biggest concern, is always going to be how is this beneficial for our kids? And to me, all the adults, we have to come together and ask ourselves those questions and see where it takes us. And so I think that the more transparency there is around curriculum, the more transparency there is around what schools are doing, the better we're going to be as a society and as a state as we move forward.
So hypothetically, say you're elected to superintendent of public instruction. Would you change the way that curriculums are developed in the first place in order to incorporate what parents think? Because it seems like it can be problematic to try and adjust curriculum through legislative, through bills on the back end once the Oklahoma academic standards are already established, and then have that work well with teachers in the schools. And so you're talking about, is the legislature the best place to sort out these questions about school curriculum? Or would you potentially, hypothetically, would you change the way the curriculum is developed in the first place?
So that's a great question. And I think it's a little more, there's a little bit of a nuanced answer here. I was very supportive and am very supportive of our legislature passing HB 1775 last year, which banned some direct types of, I don't know, I wouldn't call it curriculum. I'd call what that was, and that wasn't teaching. So if these practices are going on in schools, that can't continue. That was something that the legislature addressed that wouldn't happen. To be overly prescriptive, though, I think that there's a delicate balance to walk. For example, the House, passed out of both chambers, but started in the House, a bill on civics instruction. I thought was good to more align what we're doing with the civics test to really emphasize civics. And I think, as much as we're talking, everything we're talking about today, you're talking to a history and government teacher here. And I'm going to tell you right now, all subject areas are really important. We can kind of talk about math and English, and they are incredibly important to set a student up. But as a society, all of the things that we're talking about here, students having a robust understanding of our history and having a robust understanding of how our government works is essential too. The legislature felt, and again, I think it was very reflective of the electorate, that they wanted more of an emphasis on that. So they passed a bill that would place more emphasis on that. But to get overly prescriptive, I think, could be an issue as well. I think the State Department of Education fleshing out standards and what they look like, giving those back to the legislature and allowing them to approve them, I think right now is a good process. I think it's one that, if elected, I would want to take a deep look at and ensure that all of our Oklahoma academic standards are set up to make sure our students are successful. By the way, I think we should always be in that type of cycle where we're always looking at these things. But I think the legislature plays a role in this as well. I mean, again, I think that the legislature is representative of their communities. And when they hear something and they hear concerns and they hear frustrations, getting involved in these types of issues, I do think is appropriate at times.
I think I've got 42 follow-ups on that, Augusta and Mr. Secretary.
Me too.
So, in other words, we're going to have to pay attention. And it seems to me like that this is going to be one of those elections that we're going to have to delve beyond just the first 2 or 3 lines. I mean, this is kids' education. It's our kids' future. I've got all of mine out now, but golly, I'm watching this next generation come through, and there's so many divisive issues. And it's the parents, grandparents like me, we're going to have to start getting into the minutia and understand. You said you had a nuanced answer. I'm reading between the lines on a lot of this, so I want to flesh this out as we go forward over this next year. But I think you're giving people reason to ask questions and to flesh some of this out, which I appreciate, Mr. Secretary.
We need more engagement. To me, when you ask questions, you're going along the right path. When you have parents that are asking what's being taught in schools, how's this? I mean, Augusta's question, how do we decide these things? These are the type, honestly, as an educator, as someone involved in education every day, I welcome these discussions. These are exactly the discussions we should be having. What our kids are being taught, and is it the most appropriate thing that they should be taught, has only been going on all the way back to Aristotle. These are conversations that have gone all throughout history. That's what education is. What do we want our young people to know? And parents play a vital role in that process, in that discussion. So I am unapologetic that I think we should be leading the country in education, not as a statistic, not as a data point, but because I think all of our kids deserve that best. I got 4 little kids, and I want what's best for each one of them. I want them to all have a great education. I want all 700,000 Oklahoma students to have the best education possible. In order to do that, we've got to have these conversations. We've got to see what we can do better in all spheres in order to put our students in a successful opportunity to have the type of life that they want. And again, I welcome these conversations. I think these are some of the most important types of conversations we can have in order to improve the education for our young people.
Well, that's why we started this platform. We're so glad you could join us.
Thank you guys for having me.
We've got 2 shrinking personalities. 2 really quiet people following up behind you here that are listening to this, and we'll talk with him. That's the Western Walkie show is coming up. So
there you go.
Secretary Ryan Walters, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. See you again. Be safe out there. Okay. That was good. He's really throwing down the gauntlet. We really have got to do more engagement on these topics.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the most, I've interviewed him times, and that's the most, maybe it's because this was an evening conversation. I don't know. That was the most impassioned I've seen him talking about, promoting conversations with parents in schools, et cetera, kind of that. So that was interesting. I'm curious to see how big of a deal House Bill 1775 is in the education-focused upcoming elections that we're anticipating. Because I have to put it on the record that at this point, I have been reporting on this since the bill passed, and I have not yet heard of any evidence of, a critical race theory type curriculum or lesson or something that was problematic actually existing in any Oklahoma schools. And if I was presented with some sort of problematic evidence, I would report it. But it's sort of yet to be seen. So I think there's a lot more to follow on this question.
Well, it's thanks. And by the way, there was Augusta, one more question. I ran past the stop, and I'm sorry about that. We'll lead off with him on the next one. So next time we have the secretary in. So as I said, we have these really quiet guys to finish up the program. And this was the deadline that I had challenged Colin Walkie to an MMA match, an old guy against Colin Walkie. He says he can't do it. I have no idea why that Colin Walkie could. Oh, I think I know why he's not going to accept the challenge. What we have here is an injured.
It doesn't look like his normal self.
Yeah.
Give me 6 months, Scott. Give me 6 months. I'll be back.
I haven't seen you since you had your surgery.
I'll be on Medicare by the end. My doctor won't let me.
I got a pretty cool scar. That's about the only thing I have to show for it.
And I do want to say really quickly that my doctor is Aaron Rodgers' doctor. So it's a really bad inside joke. Aaron Rodgers' doctor is really bad. So anyway, hey, you guys want to just dovetail in before we talk about the privacy bill, what you heard Mr. Secretary talking about, and you know what this was about. You know what happened last night. You know what the discussion is about. And in Virginia, it was critical race theory. They don't teach it there, but that's what was the big question. And of course, former Governor McAuliffe had that gaffe early on, which he wore like an albatross the rest of the deal. Anyway, this is going to be an education election. Secretary Walters is running for office. The governor is going to be squaring off most likely against, Secretary Hoffmeister and the governor might have primaries. Who knows? I think there are announced candidates on the Democrat side. Your thoughts about where we may be headed on education issues, education reform coming up?
Josh?
Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yes.
Yep.
You're all
You guys
good.
got me?
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting our 6th year. It's kind of crazy that we've been here almost halfway through our tenure. We're doing 12 years, and education issues are never easy, especially as a rural member. A lot of the times that, my schools, we didn't have that problem, but I understood there were some that were in urban areas that may have had those issues. And as a rural representative, I don't have private schools here. I don't have a lot of people. There's been more people recently that started using with COVID that started using, the FX schools or the charter schools. or the regular public schools offered a lot of programs too. And so it's a different situation being a rural legislator. A lot of my teachers that taught me in school are still teaching today. And so as a representative, when education issues come up, sometimes I think, with funding, sometimes I think we'll never be able to do enough. We're getting put in that position. These types of legislation, they're not fun. They're toxic in the media, and both sides of the issue are, there's a lot of feelings involved. And but that's our job, is to vote on this type of stuff. I think everybody probably that was following the Virginia elections, over the last couple of months, I mean, it seemed like every day there was a YouTube video out from parents at a school board. So it was to be expected that was going to be a big part of that governor's race and the lieutenant governor's race. And I got 4 kids too. I got 4 kids that always go to a rural school in Delaware County, and so everything that I do, that's always in the forefront of my mind. College, they're going to have kids, but I want to ensure that my kids get a good education, and they don't have to leave Oklahoma. We need to create a pipeline for jobs, and it starts with education. So that's always in the forefront of my mind. But education issues are touchy, and they're toxic, and sometimes it pins us against teachers. The 2018 elections weren't fun. God dang, I mean, you talk about a lot of teachers that, like I said, my teachers are still teaching today, and I felt like some of the education groups tried to pin me up against my teachers. That was BS. That's not the case. I love having my teachers there. But it gets anything to do with education, it's toxic. And so I don't think it'll be as big as an issue in Oklahoma. But I can see some of these battleground states. I mean, I think the midterms, just from the outside, from Oklahoma looking at, I think the midterms are going to be a bloodbath. There's a lot of people unhappy. And it's easy. We get instant gratification. Everything's on the internet as soon as it happens. And so people like to see those contentious stories, and they like to see people going back and forth, because that's what sells. It's what people want to watch. They get their politics from a national, oftentimes from what's going on nationally, and they want both sides to hate each other. And so I don't think it'll be as big as a deal in Oklahoma. That was a long answer to get to my point, but I don't think it'll be as big as a deal in Oklahoma as it was in some of these other states.
I should also, I'm going to turn it over to Colin. I want you to respond, but I did want to make light. I mean, Colin has had a really, really serious injury in an athletic endeavor.
I don't want to.
And how are you doing, man? I mean, are you going to be okay?
I'm doing fine. I've been off pain meds the past 2 days, so I'm doing well. I, in fact, shaved just for you, Scott, today for the first time in a week.
So glad. And it was what did you do?
Jiu-jitsu.
I was like, you have to tell us now what happened.
I was doing jiu-jitsu like I do every morning, and this was just the time when I pushed a guy off me and popped and tore my pec off of the shoulder as well as my biceps.
Oh,
so they had to reattach both of those.
The BJ.
He got beat up. Yeah.
How's the other guy?
No. Well, that's just it. Is the other guy? He is good competition for me, and so he's going to say he beat me up, but that's not what happened.
Nobody believes that. Anyway, your thoughts about, and I wanted to make sure people didn't understand that we were just having fun. It's a really serious injury, and best wishes on getting better. Your thoughts about what Representative West was talking about in our general topic, before we get to the topic we're going to talk about.
Yeah, how big of an issue is education going to be next session? And the answer is I have no idea. For the exact same reason why Augusta was unable to identify any of these schools hawking critical race theory, right? It seems as though, much like QAnon conspiracy theories, it just kind of comes out of thin air as to what the issue du jour is. And so I can't predict. I will tell you one thing for sure that will be an issue is funding, because it always is, as what Representative West pointed out. And I agree with Representative West, which is, to some degree, our hands are tied. I would love to see a sizable increase in expenditures for public education, and I think we could do that. But even that, only again, is continuing to just add dribbles when we need a fire hose, in my opinion.
But I want to address it too, because it always goes back and forth. You guys like to use, and so walking our friends, but we can still drill each other. Oftentimes we talk about fully funding education. What is fully funding education? 2008 numbers. That number, especially when we first came in, was used all the time. We're echelons above those numbers. We have done something for education. Several of our first 5 years, we have addressed we have done a lot better with education. I'll put it that way. Is it the best it can be? No, but I think we've made great progress, and I think that that's always an RD thing. Money, money, money. We can't print money out. We're not the federal government, and so we have to balance the budget. And like I said, if we could print money out, hell, it'd be easy. It'd be great.
Well, yeah. I mean, but that's my point. And yeah, we used the 2008 benchmark because that was the highest funding ever. And we haven't reached that benchmark if you account for inflation, right? So the reality is once we actually get to real-time dollars where we're not 49th, 48th, 47th in the country in investment in education, that's when I'll be happier. So to Josh's point of how much is enough, get me into the top 10 in expenditures per pupil, and I'm your guy. I'll be happy.
Well, then let's do it across the board like the other states do, because they don't factor in. I mean, we don't get credit for the.
Look at you, Scott. You brought us on to talk data privacy.
The flex.
Now we're arguing about education funding.
Flex benefits, all that other stuff. A lot of those states, that is appropriated with the education budget, so it's never apples to apples. I mean, seriously, it's not. I know you would probably argue different, but if you want to look at true per pupil spending, then that's put every amount of money that we put in education and put it towards that.
I'm more than happy to sit down and have a long conversation with you about how to define per pupil expenditures. Let's do it.
So here we go. I mean, we were just leaving the secretary going, how are we going to have these conversations? Well, these are incredibly important conversations. I do. And by the way, did I just see High Hill Rev walk through the room?
Yes, you did. She just returned from the church this evening.
Is she not going to say hi?
No.
Oh, man.
Well, she thinks that this should be private, so I'll make sure to let her know.
Okay. Well, it would be really great for our ratings if she made an appearance. I'll just put it that way. Okay.
She is far more famous than myself or even the majority leader, I think.
And it's
I would
understand that one. So, and we don't have a whole lot of time left because I want to make an announcement. We had a couple of weeks ago, we did an interview. You guys had gone to Richmond, Virginia,
Alexandria.
that was in the news. Alexandria. Okay. And you had, let me just bring it up to date. You had a privacy bill last year dealing with internet privacy. Am I correct so far? It passed the Oklahoma House of Representatives. It did not go to the Senate. I know every House member that voted for this has thrown rocks at the state Senate. So we won't spend any time on that. But in the meantime, we see what's been happening in Washington at hearings. I mean, we have giant companies right now changing their name, okay, because they're catching so much heat. And in the time you passed your bill to where we're at now, people are starting to understand it. When I first heard it, we had it on your vote counts. I got to tell you, I did not understand what you were trying to do. I'm starting to get a little bit better understanding. So let me just put this up for, we have a few minutes. There is we have placed the entire interview with Representative Walkie and Representative West on all the News 9 platforms, the apps. We've got it everywhere. It'll be on Mitchell Talks tomorrow to talk about this conversation. But in a nutshell, with everybody understanding what's happening in Washington, and by the way, it's Democrats and Republicans united against big tech. Am I still accurate at this point? And Representative Walkie and Representative West this is a bipartisan on their effort. So in the few minutes we have, tell us about what you want to talk about in terms of give us the highlights of what we're up against and why it should matter to every Oklahoman.
Well, I'll let Walkie finish it out, but I just want to say, I mean, this is the optimal time to address this. And if we don't address this year, and if we don't, have the courage to address this, regardless of the political capital that you're going to burn as a member, because let's be honest, we're fighting, billion-dollar companies. This is about money, and if we don't address this year and take on this fight, then we deserve what we get. Honestly, I mean, it's right here in front of us, and Walkie and I have been screaming for the last 2 years now that, at the top of our lungs, that we got to do something. This is what's happening. We're not making stuff up. We're not crying wolf. We're not tin hats. This is a real concern, not only for, all of our constituents, for everybody in the state of Oklahoma and nationwide, but also for our country. And it's a national security issue. And I'll tell you, countries that are happy that we're not addressing it are China, or Russia, because the longer that we take to address this, the more information that they can get, because they're communist countries. They can stop it in their countries. They can stop the internet right now in their countries, and their people can say nothing. That's the way they operate. The fact that we're American, we have freedoms, that's a great thing, but we're also stubborn at times, and we need to address this year. And I think that this is the year to do it. I think it's like when Scott, when you talked to us in Alexandria, you were starting to see the real impact that this has, and there's a lot of people like you, like we mentioned in that interview. There's members that did not support the bill last year that are saying, "Oh, I get it," and so that's my stance on it. Go watch the interview. We kind of laid it out about we were at the symposium, but I think that we'll get something done this year.
And I'm sure that, and before I jump in front of you, Colin, but basically they were presenting to other states. Other states are saying, we need to know about this. The feds have said, you states do it first. Am I correct on that? And let me tell you, here's what I have here. So Ryan has sent me, this interview is on News 9, News on 6 streaming apps. Also, the extras on News 9, News on 6, the streaming apps. The news video section of the site and the apps. We'll make sure everybody can get to it. If you can't, give me a call. I'll send you a copy. So, Colin, could you really just, in replying to Josh, but also set up a real short with what your bill does?
Yeah. So our bill that's sitting in the Senate that we hope to get passed from last session is what's known as opt-in, right? So right now, only 3 states have data privacy laws, and they're all opt-out, which means as soon as you get on the internet, you are being tracked no matter where you go, everything from your keystrokes to where your mouse goes. And unless you specifically say, don't track me, they're going to track you. Our bill reverses that. And it says before you can track and collect any data on me and about me, and that's a wide range of information, including whether you take erectile dysfunction medicine, who your gynecologist is, all kinds of information they can collect. That's opt-in, and that's what we passed, and that's what we hope to get through the Senate. This session, Representative West and myself filed another bill, and this one is a little bit stronger because this one says we're not even doing opt-in. You just can't sell our data, period, because there's not a need to sell data. That's a commodity, and you don't have to sell it. All we're doing is subsidizing big tech. So we're letting the big tech decide which door do you want, A or B. I will also mention that Representative Logan Phillips has filed a data privacy bill as well. I think we're all going to join forces and see which one we can get past the finish line.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we're kind of like putting a thumb in the wall, trying to stop the ocean in trying to regulate big tech now? Do you feel like this legislation is going to be effective in the ways that you want it to?
It will be effective. Yeah, absolutely. Either one of those bills that Representative Walker mentioned will be effective. That's right now. What we're doing now is putting a thumb in the wall. You got companies like Apple that came out. We talked about it in the interview with Scott Alexandria. That Apple took it on themselves to do an opt-in, right? And so that's why we updated your phone. The last update, you got all the pop-ups on your phone from the apps that said, can we track you or whatever. So they did it themselves, but it just takes one state to pass this. And like we talked about before, the feds are not going to address this. I'm confident. I wish they would.
Why is that?
And I think they want to put it, well, because we're fighting money. There's a lot of money involved. And honestly, that's what it is. And, you get the whole side that, well, free market. The free market doesn't work. As you mentioned before, when there's no rules, the free market doesn't work. And so this is a wild west. And it's not just companies within the United States. It's companies outside the United States, companies in enemies in our enemies' countries. And so it won't be putting your thumb on a hole in the wall. This will be, if we can get either one of those, that's legitimate legislation that will stop it. And it'll force these other states to have to do something similar. It'll give them some courage. There's some states that probably don't want to do it because it's hard. It's not easy to run these types of legislation. And so I think if we do it, it forces the other states to, it gives them something as well that they can run, and it forces the federal government to take action.
And the other thing I'll say too, Augusta, just from the perspective of, has the damage already been done, was almost kind of the tone of your question. And the answer to that is no, because that's the reason why they continue to track you. Your data points are only as good as your last data points. Yeah. And so if we can stop the bleeding now, yes, they had some information about me 10 years ago, but my behavior changes throughout years. And so that's why it's important to stop the bleeding now.
Okay. And what do you both think of Facebook's rebranding to Meta? Do you? I feel like they're trying to fix their image a little bit.
I would agree. I think they're trying to save face, and I don't know. I haven't even. I saw when they were changing the name, but I didn't read in depth on. It was an acronym for something or some futuristic thing where we're going in the future. They feel like, but
Right.
so I don't care.
Josh and I were exchanging texts earlier today about this thing called Ego 4D. So go Google Ego 4D, and what it is the world's largest hourly collection of egocentric video. So Facebook Artificial Intelligence and a bunch of other entities partnered up and gave a bunch of people these self-referential videos. And they just videoed their daily lives. And they're using this information to help build algorithmic models for biometrics and help computers learn how to do human movements. Because right now, a really hard task for computers picking up a cup. And in part because it doesn't have the same visual depth perception concepts that we have. And so this is trying to help train other AI. So when you ask about Facebook changing their name, yeah, they are. And yeah, they've talked about deleting a bunch of facial recognition information.
Yes.
I don't believe a lot of that, et cetera. Not just because of what they're doing on the AI side, but because of the metaverse side. And Facebook itself may be deleting all kinds of biometric information data, but they're going to collect it through Oculus Rift, et cetera. So, and quite frankly, that information is probably more valuable because it's actual biometrics.
Hey, let me read you. You brought up some of these stories this week. So I read the financial pages, watch the channels a lot. $10 billion is what it's cost companies, tech companies, when Apple went to their opt-in thing, okay? And one of the biggest companies that's been hit by this is Meta, which is, remember Ron Artest? Remember, he was Meta World Peace. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I think this may be Meta World Chaos, but I'm sorry, bad joke.
But actually, that was METTA, which means loving kindness in Buddhism.
I understand that. By the way, if you're looking for a book on mindfulness, do you have a recommendation for a book?
Right Speech by Colin Walking. Get it on Amazon.
I thought you were talking about McDougall's book.
So anyway,
we got way off track.
This is out there, and I'm crushed. We have not seen the Reverend Lori Walkie, so I guess we're done. We're not going to get to see her tonight, but next time, okay. I want people to know that this is a really involved conversation we had, probably close to an hour. Even with the power outage we were able to reboot it, thanks to Joy Mitchell, who stitched it all together. This was a couple of weeks ago. It's now kind of like on Amazon. You were talking about your book, Colin. It's everywhere on News 9, News on 6, the apps. We'll make sure people see this. We'll post it on Mitchell Talks this evening or tomorrow morning. It's a great conversation. And so I say to you, gentlemen, what's next?
Well, we've the bill is filed, the language is filed. We have met with some of the companies that we met with last year. And obviously some of the ones that really didn't want to work with us, but they've came to the table now, and they've sent some things that they would like to see in the legislation, and we are still more than willing to work with them. We want to. We don't want to be. This is not a battle. You know, we're not out to get anybody. This is about protecting our constituents, and it's a lot more. At some point, we're not going to be talking about COVID. Like, I'm so sick of thinking COVID. This is going to last well beyond COVID. It just is. This is a lot more important topic, honestly. I mean, you're talking national security. And so November comes around, which we're in November. I forgot to do. And so later this month, the titles will be reserved for all the other legislation. We've already got this title reserved. Any changes that we make to this legislation will be done before mid-January, before the cutoff. And then this bill will be ran in Logan Phillips's committee. He's the chair of that tech committee. And like Colin said, he's been working on the issue too. He went to a data privacy conference out in California this summer. So, and then it'll go through the rigor process. And so they've got two options. They've got the bill we filed this year, and then they've got the one that we filed last year, which is still live. Honestly, if it were me, I would take the bill from last year. If I were in the tech world, I would really rather have that one. And it's still a really firm law, but it does It's an opt-in. So you as an individual, like Colin said, you have to give exclusive permission, but it does allow the sale as long as you give permission. They probably don't want the one that was filed this year. That's I'm sure that's on their top #1 bill to kill this year.
I second everything Representative West said.
Okay, and in that video, by the way, is this the full opportunity employment for lobbyist act? Will there be any lobbyists not employed over this bill?
No, as a matter of fact,
we're providing jobs.
If you go back, I listened to the interview before getting on this show, and it was really good. And I think it was in there that Representative West referenced the fact that the night before the vote, it was like ants on a cracker. You could count all the lobbyists out in the rotunda who were whipping votes. And so, yeah, it was there were a lot on it.
Yeah, if by some chance this year's legislation gets a hearing on the floor, I would say that the 60 or so contract lobbyists from last year will double or triple. They'll bring in people from out of state because this is like a button you're not supposed to press in case of emergency. This guy here will. This is not their friend.
How do you prepare for that type of push? Like, how do you prepare for that type of pushback?
Representative West and I kind of enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our personality,
Yeah.
I'm that's why we didn't really like each other when we first met each other, because we're kind of we're high strung. I get called militant. I've been called bully, whatever, and he's. If you ever watch debates on the floor, so watch 2017, 2008 walk. If you want to get the real walking before the peaceful book writing author came on and changed his heart, go watch that one. So that's probably why we that's one of the reasons we do get along, because we care about, I don't do it out of hate. I care about my constituents. I care about the job. And so we're passionate about it. And so, but yeah, we kind of like the challenge, I guess. You give me a challenge or tell me I can't do something, I'm going to try to prove you wrong. And adversity is good. I like having people disagree with me, and I don't mind having those tough conversations with the opposite side, because it challenges me to look at their side too, and also get what we want to get accomplished. So
yeah, as a lawyer, I'm used to it, because you just walk into the courtroom and duke it out, be a zealous advocate for your client, walk out and shake hands.
Yeah, you've got a target on your back.
Yeah.
How about you can't do a statewide forum live in January, whenever before the session starts on this particular bill, and take questions from all over the state? How about you can't do that? What's the answer?
Why
not?
Can't we?
Okay. I was just trying to challenge Representative West.
Oh.
I don't say anything.
Oh,
No,
you
we're
challenge
gonna do it. Yeah.
Let's do it, Scott.
Okay.
You're not very intimidating, Scott. They're just like, sure, sign us up.
And Augusta, and we'll see if she won't moderate. I mean, I think this is one of those, we can hook people up all over the state and ask these questions. By the way, Logan Phillips, Representative Phillips, has really been leading the broadband push.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if the Democrats ever get out of each other's way in Washington, there may be some more money on that. By the way, let me just, and I know we're way over time, but we're having so much fun. There's a real quick question for Representative Walkie, and I'm sorry I haven't got to a lot of questions tonight. We're still, this is a newer format, and not that I haven't done it for a year and a half on Monday, but a lot of times, Larry Bookman runs that one on Monday night, so he's better at this than me. Will Democrats ever get out of their way? It means it takes all the Democrats to do this, and right now, I don't know if you saw this, Representative West sent me a note earlier today. The GOP has named Joe Manchin Employee of the Month. Got to think that one through. Josh really didn't send me that. But you see what the joke is. You heard the stuff about how do Democrat firing squad stand in a circle. But, Terry McAuliffe would probably be the governor who would have been reelected had Biden's programs passed 60 days ago. It's an if. When you look at the exit polling, people we get something done. That's what they were saying. Will Democrats come together on this and get it done?
I do. I think there's going to be a lot more pain, though, internally before it gets better, because what I think we are at right now is kind of an inflection point where we're seeing a major disruption in the economy and people's lives. And the consequence of that has political effects. And so whether or not Bernie Sanders was popular 4 years ago doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be popular 4 years from now. And so I think right now we're seeing an inflection point for the Democratic Party to say, what are our values at the core? Because we can't continue to cut people out of the tent and make the tent smaller. We've got to make it bigger. We've got to make it more attractive. And so I do think that we will come back on both the left and the right to a more moderate position all the way around. But I also think that the Democrats need to get back to their roots, to be for the working person, to be for the $15 an hour minimum wage, for all of those sorts of things, which, as we've seen, have been what's been gutted from the bill in Washington. And so, I do hope that we do some soul searching and really get down to some core values that are shared across cultural boundaries, whether you're a rural guy or an urban guy or a gal, it doesn't matter, that we all have these common values. I think that's key.
Well, we shall see. I think speaking of Representative Phillips, I think we just lost Augusta. That's a broadband thing, so she's looking at her note. Any last thoughts for both of you in terms of the privacy bill or anything else?
No, I mean, I think that this is a year that something will happen. And like I've said before, this has never been, we may agree with legislation that we're running or that we're voting on, but this is never a personal, this has always been pushed by constituents. And that's why you have an urban Democrat and a rural Republican running this, because it's not a partisan issue. There's nothing about this protecting our constituents' privacy that has anything to do with the letter behind your name. And I'm excited to get something done this year, and it's always good to have Walkie with me. We have the type of relationship where we can jab each other on stuff we disagree with, and we've said all along, I love having conversations with people I don't agree with. It often backs up my own position, but it's good to have that. It is good, and that's what they've lost in DC. We talk about it often. I mean, we have a functioning state government, and we don't have to be like DC. And so the things that we can agree with, we tackle at full force, and and we try to be an example to others that I could disagree with somebody and vote against them and debate against them, but I can still be friends. And there's a lot more to politics to people. There's a lot more than politics. But the D behind his name, the R behind mine. So it'll be a good year.
I would just say this, Scott. I hope we can all get back to having civil conversations. I'm going to hang up here, with you, Scott, and I'm going to call Josh, and we're going to schedule a time to go through per pupil expenditures.
Yeah,
There we go.
we can do that on next show.
Well, and thanks so much. And I know Colin is not feeling well, and our best wishes, by the way, buddy, on
Appreciate it.
Getting better. The movie star looks tonight. It appears that you might be a bit under the weather, and understandably so. So
I appreciate it. Yeah.
You're when will you be back to normal?
6 months. I can step back on a mat in 6 months. Yeah.
So after session, we're ready to go.
April, actually. Don't put me into May.
It's pretty good.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Scott,
both.
good seeing you.
Good to see you both, and thanks. We'll talk to you real soon.
All right. See you, Scott.
All right, and we lost Augusta. There's a little issue on Wi-Fi, so we're going to get out of here. I want to thank her for all of her time. The great guest tonight, Pastor Fraley, who was in, Andy Moore, who was in, Secretary of Education Ryan and Walters, and of course Representative Walkie and Representative West. You can see this, a lot of these videos, and we were talking about the Walkie West video, that's going to be on all the News 9 News on 6 platforms, and we will get out of here. See you on Monday night. Thanks so much for watching News Watch Oklahoma, and we'll see you again. Have a great evening.